Our brain is a pretty interesting thing, right? There's a lot that goes on in the world. The world's incredibly complex. There's lots of information continuously coming in. Really too much for our brain to deal with continuously. So we actually create images in our mind, representations of how the world works. And these are called mental models. And so that's what I'm going to focus on for the next few minutes. And these mental models are our internal representation of reality in the world. Everybody has them. You can't not have them. They just exist. But the interesting thing is that these mental models really play an important role in how we make decisions and how we see the world. And they're really filters on the world. Pretty much everything you think about, you have a mental model of. So I'll give you an example. The first one is, if I say tree, if you close your eyes for a second, you have a mental model in your mind, a picture of a tree in your mind, right? Probably looks something like that, right? Everybody who had a picture in their mind that looks something like that? Exactly, right? Okay. Some of you may have had a deciduous tree, whatever. If I tell you that actually this is a tree, what would you say to me? No, it's not a tree, right? That doesn't fit your mental model of what a tree is. What I'll tell you in reality is that little organism that we generally call a mushroom and think of as a mushroom in our head is as much a part of a tree as what you generally have in your mind as a tree, right? So the picture up here, which is kind of dark, is actually a picture of a small sapling and its roots, and in those roots are mycorrhizal fungus that are really helping the tree to grow. Neither of them exist by themselves. They just can't do it. A tree needs fungus to acquire the nutrients that it needs. Many fungi need trees and other plants to acquire the foods that they need. So, in reality, this is what a tree looks like. In your mind, that's not what a tree is, right? So that's the power of mental models. So I'm just going to go through a few of these that are relevant to energy and some of the other important things in our lives. So, energy, we kind of all have this model of what energy is in our minds. We've gotten some alternatives to that, and I'll come back to that in a little bit. But pretty much everybody in the world holds something like this. I will say, as a bit of a caveat, these are general societal mental models. A bunch of people in here have a little bit different mental model, which is good. But these are generally held by society. So here's an energy one. Economy. When we talk about economy, generally what we think about when we think about economy, and this is something that gets repeated to us all the time, is what are you doing to improve our economy? And when we are told that means we're supposed to go out and buy stuff, right? That's what an economy is. Some big system that we're a part of, that we're supposed to contribute to. That's our mental model of an economy right now. And I'm going to come back to changes that we need to make here. Happiness. What is happiness? The mental model that we generally hold in the United States is like acquiring as much stuff as possible, right? That's what gives us happiness, that trip to the store. Education, I would say that the education mental model is probably, I'm going to say something that would get me in trouble in my regular job, but it's pretty safe here, so I maybe should have had Nick introduce me a little bit differently. But education is, the mental model that we have is probably one of the worst ideas that we've ever created for ourselves. The education mental model basically is we need to seclude kids away from the real world, put them in buildings, and put some person in front that is the instructor. And they will tell them everything they need to know in the world, right? Not all education happens this way, but this is generally what we think of as education. Leadership is another big one that we fall into. Mental model, generally some guy with a tie is the leader of everything that we do, right? Especially Nick. Yeah. See, he fits right into it. So these are just a few of our current mental models. I'm going to talk a little bit about how we need to shift these. The great thing about mental models is that we create them and we can change them. It takes a little bit of work, but we can change them through the experiences we have, just generally changing the story that we tell ourselves. We can change them at an individual level. We can also change them at a societal level. The stories that we tell are incredibly powerful, and those get reinforced in our mental models. Energy, this one's been touched on lots of times. we need to move from a centralized mental model of what energy is to this distributed mental model, and we've got lots of ideas of how that might work. Economy, this is the one that I'm really interested in. We need to move from this idea of what can I do to the economy to how do we design the economy to create the things that we want in our community, right? Very simple idea, but a major shift in the role that we as individuals play in the economy. We're not supposed to be feeding an economy. The economy is supposed to be feeding us, right? Happiness is another one. Obviously, happiness does not come from stuff. All of us here know this. But we need to tell this story that happiness comes from each other. It comes from being with family. It comes from being with friends. It comes from having relationships in community. And really, it's about a community in a very general sense. Education, obviously, from what I said, education doesn't need to happen in a classroom. Education should really be based in the community with kids doing things that all the rest of us do in our real lives. Kids are smart, they're creative, they're innovative. We need to get them involved in our communities. And then leadership, I would say leadership needs to look a lot like the people sitting around you and the people or the person that you see when you look in the mirror. We all have incredible amount of power if we just tell the story that we have the power to do these things and take charge of what we want to do. So I'm just going to end kind of coming back to this idea of how we can think differently. And again, this really all comes back to the stories that we tell ourselves, the stories that we tell each other. And I think if you kind of reflect on the mental models that we need, they all relate to other people around us. And they're about building relationships and about building community and about making connections in our own community. So thank you very much. I'll end with that.